if you actually add all the number of Shopify merchants together in terms of GMV, I think it was either third or fourth. I'll happily stand corrected on that in terms of Amazon and Target and things like that. So as an entity, it's going to be a big player and people will want to get involved in that.
Welcome to the Milk Bottle Shopify e-commerce podcast, brought to you by Milk Bottle Labs, Ireland's top-rated Shopify experts. Milk Bottle Labs build, upgrade, migrate and market Shopify and Shopify Plus stores all over the world. Milk Bottle will migrate you onto Shopify with zero interruption, guaranteed, or optimize your Shopify store and maximize store sales. This podcast is kindly supported by our favourite Shopify app and the only app we install in every store. Rewind.io is the leading backup solution for your Shopify store. We'll talk more about Rewind later. Now over to your host, founder of Milk Bottle Labs, Keith Matthews.
Welcome back to the Milk Bottle Shopify e-commerce podcast, and welcome back to Keir Whitaker, former partner marketing lead at Shopify and now a product and engagement marketing specialist, helping Shopify-focused businesses grow. Keir is fresh back from Unite, as are the team at Milk Bottle Labs, and he also organised a wonderful debrief event, the first of its type in the Shopify ecosystem. You may remember we spoke to Keir prior to Unite. Let's carry on the conversation as promised in our last podcast episode. Let's run through the events at Unite and also let's discuss the success of Debrief. Keir, great to have you back. Greetings from Dublin.
Always a pleasure. Thank you for having me back.
What part of the world are you in?
Home base at the moment in Bath, in the West Country of the UK. Not too far from your good self. Probably a 45-minute hop on a plane.
I had a conversation with a client in the UK yesterday in London, and it turns out that we could actually get to them quicker than their current agency. They're based in Edinburgh.
Yeah, it's certainly from the West Country. Bristol Airport to Dublin is a regular hop. Actually, kind of my chosen route to the States these days for clearing immigration as well. But yeah, never a hardship to visit you guys over there.
Absolutely, and we'll hopefully see you in the flesh soon. So, Keir, it was the fourth Unite Shopify Partner Conference. For those who don't know, wonderful event as always very, very well organised, and they didn't surprise us with the amount of announcements, but they certainly surprised us with a couple of the large-scale announcements. The one that most partners are talking about worldwide is the Shopify fulfillment announcement, and we can talk about that in detail.
Sure.
I suppose before we get into them, what I'd like to run through is actually, the announcements, but also the reaction at your event, because the whole idea of Debrief 2019 was to actually get people together that were knowledgeable and influential. At your event, what was the most talked about announcement?
Many were sort of given equal billing, I think, bearing in mind the kind of agencies and app sort of focused companies we had in the room. I think there was a lot of talk around the themes, updates to themes, which I think have been some of the biggest announcements, certainly, probably since Shopify began, in terms of how themes are going to change and how that can affect merchants' ability to work and create content for their themes. A lot of talk again around the APIs. I think there were 14 APIs announced, and the opportunities that they sort of proffer for app developers, also merchants as well. As you said rightly, yes, things like the fulfillment network. Shopify is basically going into the logistics business, having these warehouses in the US and using sort of AI and machine learning to place products once you've got them into that network in the most applicable place, so that you can actually now expedite your products to customers. US at the moment, they also talked about working with third parties to expand that network, and I would imagine it's probably a few years out, but I can only see that coming to Europe and other parts of Canada and South America in the future. So yeah, I think overall people were very, very excited. As I think we said before on the podcast, a lot of people, particularly in the app space, sit in that auditorium for the keynote, 50% excited and 50% wondering whether they're going to have a business tomorrow. And I think there were a couple of those potential, downsides for some app developers, particularly sections everywhere. But even those people who are talking about that as, it's an opportunity to be different. It's an opportunity to offer something extra in the terms of, say, page building and that kind of thing. So yeah, overall, I would say, honestly, it was overtly optimistic for the future, given the growth and given the potential particularly of Plus and Core as well, of course. But yeah, onwards and upwards, 820,000 merchants. And I would imagine that's only going to tip 1 million in the next few months. So yeah, really exciting.
Yeah, no, it is exciting. It's funny, the Shopify have been criticized in the past for making announcements that either, weren't followed up on or were, announced well in advance. I mean, I think that's natural for a large technology company. I mean, you can't switch on everything on overnight. The fulfillment announcement was for me a bit of a game changer, Keir, because it's actually running already and it's being tested. So it is an announcement, but it's very much a real announcement and a game changer for US merchants and also for fulfillment partners. Because if you're a fulfillment house in the US, they're inviting you in to become involved. So it not only adds value for the merchant, but it also adds value for the customer because the accuracy and the time delays around getting your product are going to be improved. And in true Shopify fashion, they turn the tables completely. And they actually are now giving fulfillment houses in the US an opportunity to engage, potentially build their business. There's very few businesses, I think, that can announce something that helps the partner, helps the merchant, and helps the end user. Would that be right?
I think that's a really valid point. I think obviously neither of us are privy to the thinking behind this, but I think to announce it without having done all that due diligence would have probably been the wrong approach. And to have it actually, in situ and working, I think was a very big reveal and a very pleasing one for many people. So yeah, I think it does open up a lot of opportunities, particularly for, as you say, fulfillment places, houses in the US particularly. And I think given the size of the market for Shopify in the US in terms of number of merchants, it made perfect sense to prove the concept there. But I would imagine they will want to push that out further and open up opportunities for fulfillment partners in further afield in Canada, US, not just US, South America and Europe, as I said earlier. I think it could be a game changer. And I think Harley, the COO, mentioned he put a stat up during the keynote where if you actually add all the number of Shopify merchants together in terms of GMV, I think it was either third or fourth. I'll happily stand corrected on that in terms of Amazon and Target and things like that. So as an entity, it's going to be a big player and people will want to get involved in that because to have the ability to basically ship a la Prime in the US is going to be huge for a lot of merchants.
Absolutely, 100% agreed. We have a very large merchant in Ireland who's shipping between 1,000 and 2,000 orders a day. And one of the investments they made last year was actually personalized packaging.
Right.
And I suppose like everybody in the UK and Ireland, we've all purchased off Amazon. And Shopify straight away announced a game changer to say, look, you can have personalized packaging. I mean, that's a major service offering for such a large company. So I suppose from the Irish context, or even from the UK market view, it probably will be a while before it gets here. But look, all we can do is wait and see. No,
absolutely. But I mean, considering many of us work, I'm sure you do work with clients in the US as well, it is a game changer for businesses that are focused on Shopify from client services perspective, this side of the pond as well. Yeah, big announcement for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to go back to the changes in core. So I suppose for our listeners, Shopify at the moment has two platforms. Shopify Plus is the enterprise platform. And that's primarily targeted at merchants that are, turning over in the region of 1 million plus. And then the standard Shopify account would be on the core platform. So there was some nifty announcements on the core side.
Yeah.
You just glossed over the sections piece. Just give us some more detail on that. That's really, really important because there's probably plenty of merchants require guys like ourselves or freelancers to make changes to a current store on multiple pages because the sections aren't available across the store. They're only available across the homepage at the moment. So can you just give us a little bit of detail, Keir, on that particular announcement?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, bear in mind that Core and Plus are kind of built on all these same technologies. Obviously, Plus extends it into certain directions, but they're all based around this idea of a theme. These, the HTML, the markup, the CSS, the images, etc., that give you the sort of visual identity for the store. And a couple of Unites ago, the themes team introduced this notion of sections and blocks, which is this ability to kind of create space on your homepage and manipulate the sections with repeating elements and things like that. And I think for the longest time, one of the, and I put it in quotes, criticisms of it was that it was unavailable on anything, as you say rightly, other than the homepage. So you weren't able to drag in certain things within the editor to, say, a product page or an about page, and so on and so forth. So lots of kind of clever solutions to that came about in order to achieve something similar. But I think Sections Everywhere is a game changer. And not just that, it's the ability to see any particular page, any particular product or collection as very easy to manipulate. So you can drag in content, say, from a blog post, and you can drop that onto a product page, so that if you have some supporting content around, say, I don't know, let's say you're selling apparel and you had a particular way that you needed to wash this so that it didn't lose its color, and you had a blog post on it, you can start to use all this information, all this content in a much more creative way, which I think will give a lot of content freedom to merchants to actually really sort of endorse their products with things other than just media, such as images and a short description. I think the other side of it as well is this new notion of master pages, where you can update once and that will flush through the relevant pages that are based upon that particular master page as well. Still trying to work through how physically that's going to work with a theme. And I think for some time they will be running, and I asked a few people on Themes team around this, how the new idiom and the old idiom, or the current idiom, I should say, around sort of layout files and such will work together. And they are definitely hoping that, you can implement these changes incrementally. But obviously, I think the move will be towards the new sort of master pages and Sections Everywhere as time goes on. I think also another big announcement, which not many people have necessarily picked up on, is this notion of content portability, where the content now sits with the store and not necessarily within the theme. So I think that's going to be huge, because that will truly allow you to test out different themes with the content that you have, say, in your original store as well. So I think that's going to be not only... Yeah.
Just explain that a little bit more.
The content portability?
Yes.
Yeah. So if you think about a page or a section on the homepage, often that content is linked intrinsically to that theme and that implementation. Whereas now it will sit more isolated on its own, so that if you then implemented that section on another theme, the content would come with it, is my understanding. So I think that means that you don't then have to go, once you put up a new theme, you have to go and re-enter all the content because maybe the sections are named differently, or they're stored in a particular way. So I think from a themes perspective, it will mean that we'll have sort of standardization in terms of naming for the sections and things like that. So I think it will mean that there'll be less frustration at the merchant end, or indeed for you guys when you're developing these themes and trying different things out. The content will go with the store and not just with the theme. Similarly, there's this notion of drafts as well, where you can actually draft. You can have changes in draft, and then when you're happy and they've been kind of signed off, you can publish them as well. So a lot of workflow things, I think, coming through themes as well. The other couple of big things, I think, on that respect were now they're going to be supporting video uploads as well as 3D models in the same way as they do images. So if your client has 3D models or videos of their products, you can just whack them into Shopify natively and they'll handle it all for you through the theme from the front end as well, which is great. Finally, this idea of some of the app extensions. So they've opened up an API that allows app developers to create editor apps. So if you can imagine being in you've uploaded a video for your product, but it's a little bit too long. If a third-party app developer has created something that allows you to edit that app within Shopify, that is now possible, as opposed to having to go out to a third-party app and bring it back into the admin. So lots and lots of workflow stuff. And I think really a lot of opportunity for people to really take control and own their content in a way in Shopify themes hasn't been possible.
Let's take a short break and I'll share the number one app we install on every Shopify build. The team at Rewind.io have developed the leading backup solution for your Shopify store. Did you know that there is no way of recovering lost data from a Shopify store? So what does Rewind do? It automatically backs up your store data, and in the event of a data loss, usually due to human error, Rewind enables you to rewind the store back to its previous state. It's so simple and is used by some of the world's leading Shopify agencies, such as Kurt Elster of Eatercycle and Kelly Vaughan at the Taproom. If your store is gaining traction, you may have multiple users making changes. Often store owners allow theme or app developers enter a store to add code. Sometimes mistakes happen and data gets deleted. So you can reduce your business risk today and prevent a costly catastrophe by installing the Rewind.io app. Get your first month of Rewind for free. Simply respond to any of the welcome messages or emails you receive after you begin your 7-day trial and mention this podcast. Now, back to the interview.
So, Keir, if you think about the changes and you think about the platform, the major platform upgrade, I think it was 2.5 years ago, they're allowing merchants to do more. So, and it's great. The new term has been coined headless e-commerce, which is basically allowing, I suppose, Shopify to many is the front end, and then you can pretty much do whatever you want, via APIs.
Exactly, yeah.
Pretty much everything, which is fantastic. But at the same time, if you give a merchant access to another 20 tools or another 14 APIs that you just mentioned, that actually does also then kind of complicate the build and the daily management of a successful store for the merchant. Is that correct, or is that maybe a little bit over analysis? Basically what I'm saying is I wonder sometimes if you open it up too much, is it actually making the management more complicated?
I think you have a very, very strong point there, Keith, to be honest. How much of this would be exposed to a client in your situation? I'm not sure. I work with a few agencies now, and a lot of them are excited by the possibility of what they'll allow them to do for their clients, not necessarily what their clients can then do for themselves. In terms of the APIs, many of these are literally that. They don't have any apps necessarily associated with them that you can leverage now. They're there for app developers, whether they be private apps like I know you guys do, or public apps that are in the App Store, to leverage more from the platform. So if you think things like order editing, which has finally come to Shopify, or the fulfillment API and these kind of things, they're all there so that people in our situation, or app developers, I should say, can take advantage of them to deliver more for the client. I think you've got more of a point around the themes, but again, I think some people are always going to go in and see what's possible in the editor. And other clients, from my understanding of talking to people in agency world like yourself, is that you'll get the support ticket and you'll go in and make the change, indeed, if that's the service you offer. So I think it's a bit of wait and see. But again, it's how much is exposed on the admin side, I think will be interesting, and how that's handled.
Either way, it's great news because they're opening it up. And as you say, whether it's an agency, a developer, or a merchant that makes the changes and takes advantage of it, it doesn't really matter. It's nice to see it opened up. One of the interesting announcements was that around the Shopify Plus dashboard a few months back.
Yeah.
They made some changes to the partner dashboard, which allowed agencies like ourselves, just with a single login, to enter multiple stores without continuously logging in, logging out, logging in, logging out. And the direction of Plus, I think, is very much, they're giving us hints of where it's going to go. One of the announcements that they made around Plus was the fact that you can now, as part of the Plus contract, you have access to a number of what they call extension stores under the one account. Mm-hmm. And they're allowing you now to log in under one username as a merchant and then make changes and access those other stores where traditionally they were logged in separately. Yeah. It's really only an admin change, along with some added data that they're pulling in, including site speed and that kind of thing. What sort of reaction did you get at the event in terms of the overall Plus announcements? Because in the room, there was some of the largest Shopify agencies in the world. So I'm assuming Plus was a focus.
Yeah, there was a huge emphasis on Plus, naturally, as you'd expect, given the sort of the revenue that Plus stores bring in and the kind of merchants that are either starting out on Plus or migrating to it. I think in terms of the dashboard and some of the administrative features, it was smiles all round, and a case of, oh, finally, the ability to go in and create new stores and then assign privileges to a single user across multiple stores and change those access rights. It all makes perfect sense. And I think it will save, particularly people like yourselves, a huge amount of time. And as the saying goes, time is definitely the money in that case. You don't want your talented team, billing for setting up permissions for merchants. So I think that was well received. I think as well, some of the data insights that these dashboards will now bring, where you can start seeing trends across stores, I think is also fascinating, both from your side and also the merchant side. And how that will influence their progress and growth, I think, will be really interesting to see. Will we see a slew of apps that kind of leverage that data? And actually, I'm not sure if they can actually access it programmatically. I'm sure they can. And, how will marketing apps kind of hook into that and start making recommendations or suggestions? I think that's going to be a very interesting space to watch as well. As you said, they basically build Shopify Plus as the all-new Shopify Plus. They've done a huge amount of work under the hood. I think they've finally tackled some of those pain points for both merchants and agencies who work with Plus on a regular basis. And I think Plus is clearly continuing to grow. As Kurt Elster said, who you mentioned earlier, at the event we ran, Debrief, he literally opens up his partner dashboard now and he just sees Plus stores. It's definitely the direction of travel. And I think anything Shopify can do to create that a better experience, both for agencies and people working with the platform and merchants, is only going to add to its offering.
Absolutely agreed, Keir. I don't think in this conversation that we'll disagree at all. It's interesting that you mentioned Kurt. I'll put this reference in the episode notes, but Kurt has just launched an excellent video. Took a lot of video footage, and the quality, I'm sure at some point we'll find out what camera he used. It's just great to see. He puts an awful lot of effort in, and he has an excellent podcast episode and a YouTube video to complement that. So I'll put that in the episode notes, as I say. In terms of Plus, we're not seeing the same growth level as the States, but it's interesting to watch the growth in the States because the demands of the client and the demands on the agencies we're very much aware of. So, when we see that kind of rush to Plus over here, we're certainly ready for it.
Absolutely.
It's interesting. Last year, the angle that I think it was Lindsay Thornton that mentioned this at the event last year was that the angle that Shopify are taking, and this is still being spoken about, is they're trying to reduce the pain points for merchants. So whatever complexity and difficulty exists or roadblocks exist for a merchant managing a store, Shopify is there to try and fix it. And the fulfillment side of things is a clear indication of that. On their latest Plus page, they're basically explaining that they're not just building a store, they're building an organization.
Yeah.
That kind of opens up your Shopify dashboard to potentially pull in any sort of information around your business, whether that be accounting, traffic through analytics, which is already there, obviously. But they just continuously do things that just mean that the next announcement is just bigger and bigger and bigger. There must be a lot of clever people in the room. That's all I'd say.
No, I agree. And I think you're right. I think the opportunity to, they used to say this, Shopify is sort of at the hub of your business. And a phrase that kept coming up at this Unite 2019 was this kind of retail operating system, this idea that the platform is one part of it, but you've also got, you've got POS, you've got interactions with other channels as well and things like that. So I think, Shopify is definitely putting itself at the center of that conversation. And the more insights it can generate, imagine all the data that they've got about every single merchant and how, you can bubble that up in a meaningful way to help people build their businesses, I think is a really interesting space to watch. The more data you can have as a merchant and as an agency as well, of course, to influence how a company grows and how they market and, audience and, fulfill is definitely going to all push not only Shopify, but all of its merchants forward as well. I'm pretty sure of that. So
Keir, in terms of debrief, what sort of numbers ended up in the room?
So we had about 155 sold tickets, and we had a waiting list as well, which was very surprising, but very nice. So I think we could have probably really crammed them in, but fire regulations said no, rightly so. So yeah, I think we started the day with about 150 people, and as I was telling you earlier before we hit record, that it kind of resembled a bit of a left luggage spot at an airport, because I think most people had, very nicely decided to stay around a bit later and join us for most of the day. And it was a really interesting day. We had, as I said earlier, 5 panels, touching everything from sort of themes and app development to a kind of a bit of stab into, what the future might look like 12 months hence in the last panel. But overtly positive reaction to all of the announcements. As I said, a couple of old, finally type things, but mostly, APIs, the move to GraphQL, the theme stuff I think was really interesting and a big announcement. That's the first time we've really had that kind of level of change in the theme space as well. So very, very exciting there. But overtly, people still seem very energized by working in the space. And whilst there were a couple of people in the room that were maybe dabbling, that's probably me being disparaging, working with other technologies, most people in the room are doubling down on Shopify at this point. So that was really, really interesting to see.
Keir, was there people in the room kind of challenging the announcements?
I think there were some obvious reactions to some of them, particularly one of our patrons of the event runs a sort of page building application that's very, very popular amongst merchants and agencies at the moment, Shogun. And I think, one of the questions to Nick on the panel was, do you see the move to sections everywhere as a negative impact on your business? And he was totally the opposite. And I kind of agree with him. He's like, sections everywhere, it was inevitable, it was going to happen, but what we do is entirely different. We offer much more functionality. It tailors to a different different market, and it's kind of the plate is big enough for everyone. There's always going to be a need for something slightly bigger and better or different than the core offering of Shopify. And I think that's why, the announcements around the APIs got people excited. A couple we haven't touched on, they opened up a couple for the checkout, one of which is subscriptions API. So that means now that you won't necessarily have to go off to a third-party checkout from Shopify. And you can still hook into all these subscription apps as well. So I think they're starting to see these little inputs where APIs can play a part, and then they can still go off, and the opportunity is still in Appland. Recharge are working with them on that. But again, there's so much opportunity, I think, in terms of the way that you can plug into Shopify, that there's almost too much to think about with 14 APIs announced after all.
Yeah, and your point is valid. Like, it's again in typical Shopify fashion. Even though they're launching that availability, they're also working with the largest subscription, app provider. So
yeah,
there's a bit of class. I think is probably a good way to describe how they operate. The other thing I've noticed over the last couple of years, Keir, a lot of app developers and agencies are clever enough. They're hanging their hat and their sail is firmly stuck on the mast of Shopify. But most people are clever enough to be doing multiple things within the ecosystem, so that if they do make a change, it drops one app. Well, at least there's a plan B. Last year at Unite, I remember we were sitting behind some app developers from the UK, and the marketing API was released. I think it was tested on Bjorn Fjorsberg, one of his orderly emails app.
Mm-hmm.
They explained to us that 6 months' work was just gone down the drain. But by now, next year will be Unite number 5. People will be clever enough to understand what sort of announcements are going to come out. There will probably be announcements that will affect your business, but every announcement still leads to some sort of an opportunity, and you just have to be prepared to go and chase it.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And that must have been a very disheartening feeling for those people in the audience. Absolutely. But I think it goes back to sort of trying to build strong relationships with the API teams and the sort of app developer experience teams. I still think that pays dividends for a lot of people, keeping them abreast of what you're up to, where you're thinking. And my understanding is that, there's a conversation there that no one at Shopify wants you to go down the 6-month development route only to have it cannibalized at Unite. So I think as you go back, it's like, what are the pain points? What is it, the things that are going to help merchants achieve what they want to achieve quicker and easier? And I think these APIs, a lot of them open up new opportunities. But yeah, I think you also have to be realistic. And I've spoken to enough app developers to know that many of them aren't necessarily thinking this is a 20-year business that they're building, but there may be an opportunity for 4 or 5 that can be very profitable. And as you say, having more things on your plate is probably no bad thing.
So, Keir, that was your 4th Unite in your previous role on the partner marketing team with Shopify. You were heavily involved in the actual organizing. This time your role was slightly different. You were organizing your own event, and you were, I suppose, effectively a partner visitor to Unite number 4. Was it a different experience for you personally?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It really was. And they had badges for attendees. And I claimed the 4. I claimed the badge with 4 on it. I thought, why not? But no, it was really nice, actually. I mean, as you know, from running from meetups, these things can be unnecessarily nerve-wracking and, stressful. So it was very nice to be, take it at a leisurely pace and not have to be in the venue at sort of 6 a.m. But production values were very high. It was really, Shopify Unite brings together all the people that I've met, and I met a lot of new ones as well. So it was always a pleasure to catch up with them. But yeah, it was really nice to sort of sit back, take in the announcements, and sort of, as I say, they affect me in a different way now. So it's it's trying to make head or tail of them and see where the opportunities are for the people that I work with today. But we still had a little bit of that stress because the day after, obviously, we had to go and sort of host debrief. But thankfully, we picked a very nice venue, and everything ran pretty smoothly. Mostly thanks to having 2 qualified baristas on hand with the flat whites. So that seemed to help.
I'm assuming that we'll have a debrief 2020, will we?
I very much hope so. I joked at the event that it was very kind of the organisers to leave the Friday free. But nevertheless, I think the appetite was such that I think we could probably do it on a weekend as well if need be. I think people got a lot from it. The feedback we've had so far has been really strong. I think it allowed people to sort of work out what the announcements mean generally, but also ask some specific questions of other people in the space that maybe they hadn't been able to ask as well. And we're following it up, actually. If you'll permit me just to do a shameless plug, Keith, we'll be releasing a report where some of our patrons are contributing with their take on Unite and the future of commerce over the next 12 months, as well as a few guest articles and our own take on it as well. That's going to be available from debriefevent.com, all being well in September as a PDF download. And so that's a kind of a product that will come out of Debrief itself. And I think, as I joked to the contributors, it will be a great opportunity to either say how amazing your foresight was in 12 months, or you really thought that and look what happened. So a bit of fun as well.
Keir, it was great talking to you. And just before we go, it's interesting how people try and predict the announcements.
Yes.
You know, you predicted that discussing the announcement was going to be a success. And fair play. I mean, Unite will be bigger next year. So hopefully Debrief 2020 will be bigger next year.
Yeah, I hope so. I also believe that there's something, there's a sort of a premium size for these kind of events. And I think sort of 150 to 200 is probably that. So I'd hope we'd keep it to that level of intimacy, because it lends to better conversations, in my opinion.
Absolutely agreed. Well, Keir, thank you very, very much. Our team thoroughly enjoyed the event. Thanks for your time. We'll put all of those references in the episode notes. Thank you very much.
A pleasure as always, Keith. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for listening to the Milk Bottle Shopify e-commerce podcast. All of our episodes are available on Spotify and iTunes. We really appreciate the support of our sponsor, Rewind.io, the leading backup solution for your Shopify store. Get your first month of Rewind for free. Just respond to any of the welcome messages or emails after you begin your 7-day free trial and mention our podcast. Until the next time, take care.